Chapter 22, Gone but Not Forgotten. When I got home to Grandma's and walked inside, the house felt lonelier than ever before, and the quiet was too much to take. There was no telling when Grandma would come home from shopping, so I walked to the storage shed attached to the back of the house and found a pair of cross-country skis and boots. By then, another inch of powder had fallen. The new snow made skiing smooth and comfortable, while the hard crust underneath kept me sliding along quickly. I started off down the road toward town, the hood of my parka pulled over my head and my face lowered to keep the snow out of my eyes. A light wind at my back swirled the snow along at my feet, so sometimes when I looked down, I didn't seem to be moving at all. Soon I found myself caught up in the rhythm of skiing. I stepped forward quickly and simultaneously pushed off with the opposite pole, glided forward a foot or two, then stepped off onto the other foot and glided again. Light from the bright moon filtered through the holes in the clouds here and there, supplying ample light to show me the way. Before I knew it, I had covered the 5 miles to town. I hadn't found any solutions to my new dilemmas, but I had found a degree of peace and calm. Solutions would come with time. I would be patient. 3 inches of soft white snow covered the roads now, and I could continue through town without taking off the skis. I thought of skiing past Becca's, but I didn't know what I'd say to Netta if I saw her. I skied a few more blocks into town and was about to turn around when I reached the cemetery. Down the road a ways, a pair of car headlights shone through the falling snow as they drove toward me. I preferred not to be seen or talked to anyone just now, so I skied into the cemetery and disappeared between the trees and tombstones. When I reached the back row, I turned left and stopped at a small, shiny granite headstone. After releasing my bindings and laying my poles on the snow, I sat down and leaned one shoulder against it, taking off one glove and tracing the inscription with bare fingers. Andrew Rasmussen, 1934 to 2017. The flakes had stopped falling, and I lay back in the snow, staring up at the heavy clouds rushing by overhead. Bare branches of maple trees stood in stark contrast to the white edges of the clouds and the moon's round white curves when it managed to break through the cracks in the atmosphere's canopy. The snow felt soft and cool against my back, and I took a deep breath to relax. I wanted to think, to figure everything out, but nothing came to mind. I had long since come to terms with Grandpa's departure. It was Grandma I was worried about now. The moon broke through the clouds just then, and its light poured onto the fresh snow, almost turning the scene to day. I turned my head to watch the transformation, and an ancient, ornate tombstone nearby caught my attention. Corners had long since worn and chipped away, and moss covered half of the lower north side. The inscription read, Koalas, Infant Girl, July 15 to 24, 1889. I leaned forward and peered closer to read the moss-covered inscription below, Gone but Not Forgotten. Why do people have to remember? I asked myself. Why can't they just forget and get on with their lives? Do we try to remember out of a sense of loyalty, as if we're proving our love for the departed by suffering and grieving and never letting go? The departed couldn't want that, and it certainly doesn't make the living feel any better. But I can't just forget either, I realized. I wouldn't want to. Remembering Grandpa made my life richer. He became a part of me, and that part stays forever and adds its bit of sweetness to living. My head spun. Remembering simultaneously causes pain and makes life richer. I couldn't make sense of it, couldn't decide which was the best way to react. I thought about my own life, too, that one day I would be buried in the frozen ground. Would I be forgotten? Would remembering me cause pain? If Grandpa hadn't been such a great person, he would have been easier to let go. But you can't just live your life in mediocrity to avoid future pain. That would only cause more pain. No, like it or not, suffering cannot be avoided. Not in this life, not as long as love and loss and death exist. So all we need, I thought, is a way to get past the pain, some place to find comfort. I knew where I wanted to find a little comfort right now. I wanted to see Netta. True, she would leave for France soon, but for right now, it felt good to be with her. Even among the living, there will be pain, I realized, but when you share it, it becomes more bearable. "Ah, Grandpa," I sighed to myself, reaching out to touch the cold stone once more. "If only Grandma could have you nearby." For the third time in 3 days, the same feeling swept over me, the deep peace, the strength, the hope that touched me and helped me decide to drive to Wyoming early, the feeling after chopping wood in the barn, and now here. This time, I recognized the feeling. It was the same way I felt when Grandpa used to look at me with so much love and pride in his eyes. The same thing I felt when he and Grandma would sing together, hand in hand, at the piano. The same feeling as when I knew I was loved and accepted unconditionally. "Grandpa?" I asked under my breath. "Is that you?" The feeling continued strong inside me, and I suddenly felt that everything would be all right, that things would work themselves out just fine. I found it impossible to believe otherwise when the world suddenly felt so right. I sat up in the snow and reached out to touch his tombstone once more. "I love you too, Grandpa," I whispered softly. Chapter 23. Love and Courage. Soon I got up and skied out of the cemetery. I felt better now, so I grew restless to keep moving. A few minutes later, I found myself at the concrete bridge between the high school and the cafe, gazing down into the water. Reflections from the sky shimmered like silver on the ripples, and I remembered the dime I had tossed into the stream 2 nights ago. What if I'd have known, I wondered. If I'd have known all along that Netta was leaving soon and that she wouldn't let me get close to her, would I still have made that wish? I guess that's the danger in making wishes for yourself, I thought. They just might come true, and you have no one else to blame. Anyway, of course I'd have made the same wish. The short amount of time I had spent with Annetta had been wonderful. I had already learned and changed so much, and I couldn't imagine giving that up. My thoughts then took the next logical step. If what we had shared already was good, if the connection was worth any pain it might bring, if we're better off for having crossed paths, then why wouldn't more connection be even better? Of course! It all comes back to courage. You can't live your life setting up safeguards against getting hurt when you should be acting with courage. You can't hold back when you should be living. Life is far too limited already, too short, too precious to waste, to throw it away, to lock up and hold back and save when you only get to keep what you spend. I should open up and spend it all. I should spend it freely, trusting that there will always be more. That's what it means to live. And that was exactly what I determined to do. Netta could do whatever she wanted with her time and her heart, but I would be myself and not hold back my feelings. I looked up at the sky and tried to guess what time it was, but the clouds offered no clues. Maybe it wasn't too late to catch her at work. I started off immediately toward Becca's and didn't stop until I stood outside the door, looking in through the glass at the dark interior. The reflection of the street lamp made it difficult to see inside, but I could tell that the kitchen light was still on and that a shadow occasionally moved past it from within. I had no way of knowing whether Netta or Jim cast the shadow, but to wait and see if they stepped into the light. Then the light went out. I stood on the sidewalk looking at my own reflection on the glass then. There was no use trying to hide. I couldn't take off running with these skis on, and I must have looked perfectly visible already from the inside, standing under the street lamp outside the large window pane. So I waited. And then the door opened, and Annetta's face peered out. "Spencer, have you been here long?" she asked. "No, I just skied up," I said. "I was hoping to catch you before you went home." "Well, come in then. It's freezing out there." I unclipped my ski bindings and walked inside, my boots clicking on the tile floor. "Aren't you cold?" Netta asked. "No, I'm okay. As long as you keep moving, you stay warm enough." Even so, I gave a quick shiver, more like a shudder, at the sudden change in temperature. "Can I get you some hot chocolate?" she asked. "Yes, please. That sounds great." I pulled off my coat and draped it over a bar stool as Netta got 2 mugs of steaming hot chocolate, each with a dab of whipped cream floating on top. She left the lights off and carried them around the bar. "Come over here," she directed. walking toward a corner booth. She set the mugs on the table, then walked back to the cash register and took out a few quarters for the jukebox. When the record started playing, she slid in next to me. Here in the corner, we could sit next to each other and still face each other without turning completely sideways. At first, she seemed concerned about how I felt after the news about her leaving, but soon relaxed as she saw I was back to my usual self. "How is work?" I asked. Annetta rolled her eyes a little. "Tolerable," she said. She looked tired. "Why?" I asked. "What happened?" "Nothing really," she sighed. "It's just—" She stopped there. "You might as well tell me, Netta," I said. Annetta gave in and began talking without looking up. "Oh, it's just some of the people around here. They don't mean to do any harm, but they don't know what they're doing." I had no idea what she was talking about, so I waited for her to continue. "See, Jim's a really nice guy, and the only one near my age around here, and we had sort of been friends from when I used to visit, so when I moved up here and we spent a lot of time together, everyone had us pegged as a couple. I hadn't worried about Jim as competition since I first got to know Netta and decided the two of them were on totally different levels. I steeled myself to hear whatever news came next, afraid that Netta's feelings for Jim might be the true reason for her distance toward me. "But we're just not a good match," she continued, as I breathed a sigh of relief. But that didn't stop some of the local matchmakers from encouraging him, telling him to just be patient. I think they somehow got the idea that I would settle down and stay here forever. I put one arm around Netta's shoulders, hoping she wouldn't mind. She lay her head on my shoulder and continued. "So Jim believed them. A few weeks back, he started talking to me about getting serious. I couldn't believe it. We were best friends, but nothing more. I was so surprised that I'm afraid I didn't take it very well." Annetta winced at the memory. I laughed and told him he was crazy, and, as you might guess, things haven't been very comfortable between us ever since. "That's too bad," I consoled, relieved to know that nothing worse had happened. "But that's not the worst of it," Netta continued. "When word got out that we had broken up, that's what everyone called it, well, some people got mean. They all took Jim's side as if I was wrong and they had any say in the matter. Some people came here to the cafe more often than usual, but made a point to not talk to me and to not tip. At first, I was furious that anyone would be so vengeful over what shouldn't have been an issue at all or any of their business. But then I started missing having friends, at least Jim. So I started making an effort to be extra nice, and things are finally getting back to normal, but I'm so tired." "At least the worst is behind you, right?" I asked hopefully. Annetta looked up and shook her head. "No," she answered, "because then you show up, see? And suddenly everybody comes in talking about you and me." I tried to focus on Annetta's feelings, but couldn't help feel the hope that sentence gave me. So much for their loyalty to Jim. By now, I couldn't care less what anyone thinks or says, but there's poor Jim working right beside me, having to listen to every bit of it. It's like everyone just forgot him, and how must that make him feel? To hope and wait all these months for something to happen with me, and then some guy just shows up out of nowhere, and it all works out for him just like that? By this time, I was soaring. Never had I felt so good before and had to try not to show it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, I never led him on in the first place. I even told him straight out that it wasn't going to happen, but I know he just kept hoping anyway. Tonight, he'd hardly even look at me. I feel awful. Now she looked so sad that I didn't care what she wanted or didn't want from me. I wrapped my other arm around her and pulled her close. Annetta scooted closer and wrapped one arm across my chest. "Part of me knew something would happen with you and me right from the beginning," Annetta whispered tiredly. "So I decided right off that I wouldn't let it." I wondered what exactly she was talking about. I wonder if she meant that she was falling for me and why she was trying not to. I wondered what would happen now that she had failed, or if she had failed. "You're not blaming yourself for all the trouble with Jim, are you?" I asked. I felt her body relax a little then. "I guess I shouldn't, should I? I'd say the only part that's your fault is that you're so irresistible." I ran my fingers through her hair, and she looked up into my eyes and smiled weakly, then lay her head back on my shoulder. "Listen, Spencer," she said, Don't think I'm not a little crazy about you, okay? Because I am. I squeezed her a little closer and felt my heart pounding in my throat. I wasn't going to tell you that either. She laughed a little. But let's not get involved, okay? I'm leaving so soon, and there's no telling if we'll ever see each other again. Why put ourselves through that? And Jim deserves a little consideration, too. He's been a real gentleman and a true friend. He's earned that much. I've been thinking a lot about that since this afternoon, I said, and I've decided something. I wanted to look her in the eye while I said it, but she didn't look up. I thought about everything you said about courage and about living life, and I realized that I don't want to pretend that I don't like you, and I don't want to miss out on something good that could happen between us. I know I can't make you change your mind, but I had to tell you what I thought and how I feel about you. And how do you feel about me, Spencer? I wasn't prepared to answer that question. Sure, I really liked her, maybe even loved her in a way, but it was too early to commit that to words. On the other hand, nothing less would do. Saying, I like you, or I think you're swell, would sound so weak and meaningless. I'm crazy about you, I finally said, repeating her own words and feeling less vulnerable because of it. I know we don't know each other all that well and that we don't have much time left to spend together, but when that's gone, I don't want to spend the rest of my life regretting that I never told you or never held your hand or never kissed you. By the time I finished that last sentence, Annetta had looked up from my shoulder. She spun around on the bench so she faced me, then wrapped both arms around my shoulders and buried her face in my neck. It wasn't fair for me to ask you how you felt, Annetta whispered, when I already knew I wouldn't change my mind. What would change your mind? I asked. Don't ask me that, please, she said. At least give it more time, okay? So I just held her there without a word, hoping something was happening despite all her determination and words and resolutions, hoping I had enough time to make her want to stay. Listen, she said after a while, everyone's going snowmobiling tomorrow. I'd like it if you come. I'd love to, I answered. Good. We're all meeting around 8 by the highway. We slid my skis inside her car from the back, and she gave me a ride home. I hugged her once more after taking my skis out of the trunk at Grandma's house. This time she pushed away after a moment, but kept hold of my hands and stood close to me, looking up into my eyes, near enough for me to feel her warm breath on my chin. She looked happy again. Listen, she said, you can call me Annetta if you want to. Nobody else calls me that, and I like it when you do.